All right, let's just jump right into this explainer. You know, it's so easy to look at financial disasters as just random acts of bad luck, like a sudden lightning strike out of a clear blue sky. But today, we're going to completely shift that perspective. We're going to look at them for what they really are: highly predictable, entirely logical chain reactions.
I mean, just listen to this quote describing the 2007 U.S. crisis: a once-in-a-century credit tsunami. Wow. That really sets the stage, right? It perfectly captures the massive stakes of what we're breaking down today. We're really tackling three huge questions here. Why do these crises happen in the first place? Why do they spread like wildfire? And why do they end up completely devastating the real, everyday economy?
So here's our roadmap for this explainer. We'll be covering 1. The anatomy of a crisis. 2. The hidden information problem. 3. Stage 1. The spark. 4. Stage 2. Bank panic. 5. Stage 3. Debt deflation. And finally, 6. The collapse of trust.
Okay, part 1. Anatomy of a crisis.
So what actually is it? The absolute most crucial point to understand here is that a crisis happens when financial markets literally just stop functioning, right? It's not just a bad day on Wall Street where stocks dip. We're talking about severe disruptions. Sharp, terrifying declines in asset prices, huge financial institutions outright failing, and a massive breakdown in information flows. The whole machine just completely jams up.
Moving on to Section 2, the hidden information problem.
Now, to get to the root of the disease, we've got to translate a couple of dry academic terms into plain English: adverse selection and moral hazard. You've probably heard them, but really they boil down to asymmetric information problems. Think of these as invisible, highly dangerous barriers between everyday savers and the actual productive firms that need that capital to grow. When one party knows vastly more than the other, that asymmetric information, it creates a truly toxic environment. And when things get bad enough, that critical flow of information, it just snaps.
All right, Section 3, Stage 1, the spark. You see, in an advanced economy, a financial crisis isn't just one big explosion. It's a distinct, step-by-step process. We're going to walk through the classic three-act play: the initial phase, the actual banking crisis, and the grand finale, debt deflation. So Stage 1, that initial spark, how does it actually happen? Well, it usually gets triggered in one of a few ways. It might be a totally mismanaged credit boom, often sparked by financial liberalization, where banks just load up on risk and depositors are completely oblivious. Or it could be a bursting asset bubble where prices have skyrocketed way past reality. Or, honestly, it could just be a massive, sudden spike in uncertainty, maybe a huge stock market crash or a massive bank going under. And once those sparks fly, prices drop, panic sets in, those problems we talked about earlier, adverse selection and moral hazard, they rapidly get worse. This forces banks into a terrified panic known as deleveraging. They get scared, they hoard cash, and they abruptly stop lending. And when they pull back, economic spending violently contracts. What was just a euphoric lending boom literally overnight turns into a brutal lending crash.
The takeaway here? Whether that very first spark comes from crazy credit, bloated assets, or just pure uncertainty, the end result is exactly the same: increasing fragility in the financial system. Everything becomes this incredibly precarious set of dominoes, just wobbling, waiting for the slightest breeze to knock them over.
Which brings us to Section 4, Stage 2, Bank Panic.
So those rotting balance sheets eventually push financial institutions straight into insolvency. The decline in economic activity triggers a full-blown banking crisis. That, in turn, completely wrecks whatever information flow is left, which leads to even more economic decline. It's a classic, vicious downward spiral. This is where the biggest domino of all actually tips over.
Just picture the sheer terror of a classic bank run. Everyday depositors have absolutely no idea which banks are actually insolvent, because remember, that information is totally hidden. So, what's the logical thing to do? Everyone rushes to pull their money out at the exact same time. The banks instantly bleed dry of liquidity. To survive, they're forced to dump their assets at absolute rock-bottom prices, fire sales. This completely shreds their balance sheets even further. It's a full-on systemic panic that can literally take years to recover from.
Now for Section 5, Stage 3, Debt Deflation. This brings us to the truly terrifying concept of debt deflation. Okay, so as the crisis gets deeper and deeper, overall price levels in the economy start to fall. Asset prices drop. But here is the absolute kicker. Your debt, it doesn't adjust.
you still owe the exact same amount on paper, meaning the real burden of that debt becomes dramatically heavier.
Let's actually look at the concrete math here to see just how lethal this is. Imagine a totally healthy firm in 2015. They've got $100 million in assets and $90 million in liabilities. So a solid $10 million in net worth. Doing great, right? But then a crisis hits, and price levels drop by a seemingly manageable 10% by 2016. The real value of their assets basically stays flat at $100 million, but the real value of their liabilities, their debt, it actually creeps up to $99 million. And because that real burden of debt rose while prices fell, look at what happens. Their net worth plummets from a healthy $10 million down to a devastating $1 million. In a single year, just a 10% price drop practically wiped the entire company off the map, and they didn't even do anything wrong. That is the unseen, absolute crushing weight of debt deflation.
Finally, Section 6, the collapse of trust.
Because when you zoom out, the true currency of the financial system, it isn't dollars, it isn't euros or yen, it's trust. The entire global system is built purely on economic actors believing in each other. When a single major institution collapses, it totally shatters that public trust, sparking a massive contagion that sweeps through the whole system.
So, to summarize what we've covered in this explainer today, financial crises are absolutely never isolated events. Whether we are talking about the Great Depression or the 2007 global financial crisis, they are driven by asymmetric information, and they follow a shockingly predictable, devastating pattern: boom, fragility, panic, and then recession. And they leave profound, long-lasting scars on the real economy.
Which brings us to our final thought. You've now seen the invisible architecture of a collapse, right? You've seen the asymmetric information, the initial spark, the massive panic, and the crushing math of debt deflation. Knowing exactly how fragile this entire chain reaction is, how much of the modern economy, really your daily life, relies on absolutely nothing more than a collective, invisible sense of trust, kind of makes you think twice before you swipe your card, doesn't it?